Welcome to Mastery Fractional CFO's Punchy podcast, short, impactful podcasts where I speak with business leaders from all walks of life about business. I'm your host, Ryan Chenier. I'm the founder and CEO of Mastery Fractional CFO Services. And today I've got with me David Solomon. David Solomon is the founder of Sero Growth. And David is going to tell us all about who he is and what he does. So David, give us the background about you and your business. Tell us about your company and we'll get rolling from there.
Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate this opportunity. And, I'm a Fractional Chief Revenue Officer, which for many people is a new term. It's a new title because the revenue folks haven't been brought to the strategy table. We're used to hearing about the CEO, the COO, and of course the CFO. They're at the table planning the growth and the strategy of the company. But one of the seats that has been left behind for so long has been sales. And sales is the engine that churns the company. So right now, we're starting to see more and more folks like myself getting to the strategy table at the larger corporations at a full-time basis, planning future growth. What I do at Sero Growth as its founder is I work with small to mid-sized businesses, bringing that large strategic thinking, but really customizing it, planning it, and making it work for small to mid-sized businesses, especially those looking to grow beyond their current markets. Because today, with the volatility and everything that's going on in the world, you need to plan and strategize where you're going to go, how you're going to go, and how you're going to make it happen. And business owners just don't have the time, the resources, the team. You're working in the business, you're working on the business. And that's where myself and my team, we come in to take that burden away and ensure your growth. And especially whatever direction that you want to take the company in revenue-wise, that's where we want to go with you.
How did you get into this business, David? Tell us maybe about your background and what led up to this.
Absolutely, thanks. I've been in sales for 35 years, and I'm one of the rare guys who said, I'm happy to be a salesman. I know that salespeople are considered, those used car salesmen, those thieves, those commission-hungry people. That was never me. And I was very lucky early on in my career. I worked with companies like Walmart around the world. I worked with Target. I got into retail and I learned from them about strategic growth. They don't want to be sold a product. And that's the mistake a lot of vendors will do. No, they want to be sold a program so that they can achieve their revenue growth goals. And that's how they got me thinking. So starting in the toy business and then eventually in the newspaper industry, I took the companies to different levels of sales. We expanded into new markets. At the toy business, I did business on every continent, Brian. I had a great time finding distributors and partners to move our product that we were manufacturing in Canada. And then the newspaper business, it was just discovering new ways of helping advertisers to grow and to deliver their message. At that point, I stopped. After 20 years of doing that, I went back to school to get my MBA. And at 42 years old, Ryan, it's a cool experience when everybody else's average age is 29. And so when the program was over, the dean of the program asked me, you're the old guy here. You're the seasoned white-haired guy. What do we do well? What do we do badly? And the one thing I pointed out was we don't talk about sales in business school.
Isn't it true?
And so they invited me to build a course, to which I originally said no. They twisted my arm, and I've been teaching now for the last 8 years to MBA students as well as Masters of Retail Management students about strategic revenue growth. I'm doing this at McGill University. So 2 years ago, I had the revelation. I'm teaching it. I did it for large corporations. I did it for small companies. Why don't I do this for other companies that really want to experience that growth? And so I launched Sero Growth officially October 2023 and been working with companies in Canada and the United States that want to go internationally, but also international companies, especially those in Mexico, who want to come to the US and Canada. So that's been where I've been playing.
Very interesting. And you're right, that was my experience in business school as well. There's marketing courses, but there aren't sales courses. And sales is a very critical component of the marketing part of the business, absolutely. Would you say that your role as a fractional executive or fractional professional is to work with companies on their sales strategy, or is it more of a sales and marketing strategy? Is it both?
That's an excellent question. And one does not work without the other. First of all, I highly recommend people don't hire one person to oversee sales and marketing at the same time because they're two different animals, but they're linked. So while I come in, the first thing I plan out with them is the strategy for sales, your revenue, where do you want to grow? How are we going to do it? Who are we going to target? What are the pain points we're solving? What's the unique solution? And then I hand all that over to marketing and I say, now go build out a marketing campaign, a communications campaign here based on this. So when I send out the new sales team out, the marketing that needs to be done in that new market matches. But they have to work hand in hand. They cannot work in conflict, and they can't have differing KPIs. They must work in alignment, or the growth is going to be stumped.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the sales side, you're going to really depend a lot on what's happening on the marketing side from a branding point of view, from an awareness point of view. But assuming that the marketing side of the business, the advertising side of the business is being looked after properly. On the sales side, it sounds like that's your focus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so how would a company recognize that you might be a part of the solution for them? What kind of business might they be? What kinds of problems might they be experiencing? Give me an idea or a flavor for that.
So before the current American administration, I used to tell everybody, if you tried and you failed to go into a new market, or you're just stumped, you just don't know where to go, give me a call. And that has been more than enough to get me going. But now forget the politics aside. Donald Trump has made people realize that the United States isn't the only market in the world. But people are afraid. There are cultural differences, linguistic differences, legal differences, buyer patterns, and so on and so forth. To go learn all that by trial and error could destroy your reputation. It could destroy your company. I've had those experiences. So I bring that knowledge to those companies and saying, if you're a Canadian company wanting to go to Japan, keep in mind these certain differences. If you're an American company wanting to go to Mexico, keep in mind these differences, because there are differences. We don't buy the same, we don't consume the same, we don't sell the same, we don't relate the same way. And so the inherent danger, is you might hurt yourself too badly if you try it. I'll throw a salesperson in there, we'll figure it out as it happens. That could damage your company. And you, Ryan, especially as a fractional chief financial officer, how much resources and financial resources can you expend on an experiment? If it's not planned out right, how much inventory am I putting on the side? What people do I need? How much should I invest in? All these things, if it's not planned out, we're just going to wing it, as a lot of companies said. Wow, that could really hurt the company's bottom line, reputation, and so on.
Yeah. You want to be as strategic as possible. You want to analyze what the possible risks might be, and you want to have a flavor for what the return on investment might be of different initiatives, and you have to be strategic. Sometimes you don't have certainty, but you want to make sure you've thought it through as best as possible, and that you understand the factors externally and internally in the company that can help make a positive difference.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. Just to give you an example, today someone asked me about expansion into Europe, and I said, "Well, have you heard of this thing called GDPR?" And they were like, "What's that?" I said, well, that's their big privacy law all over Europe that if you're not familiar with it, could actually cripple your company. Oh, I didn't know that. And so there are a lot of unknowns and assumptions that we tend to make that our country or our market, the way we work, is the way it works everywhere else. And so, that's why I work with other fractionals, or I work with other directors of the company. I don't just come in as a sales guy, because the traditional sales guy comes in and says, I'll get you more business. Okay, but what's the impact on the rest of the company's cash flow, the inventory, the people, as I said. How does this impact the CEO? Because the CEO does not want to find him or herself suddenly unable to lead the company because it just got to be too big and too much. So you got to really be smart and tactical of how you're going to grow and expand. It's not just, like I said, throw stuff at a wall and hope something sticks.
Yeah. So you come into a business, an organization, and you're working with the CEO and maybe other key stakeholders in the business.
Absolutely.
Because to your point,
Yeah,
you want to align everything there, the budget, the finance side, the sales and marketing side. There's a marketing component maybe that you need to align with, and there's operations. So there's a lot going on, but the revenue is obviously, as you say, it's the engine that drives the rest of the business, and so it's critical. So you engage with the business, and what would a CEO expect of you in terms of what's the process? I mean, how does it begin?
That's an outstanding question. The first thing is we sit down. We have a very difficult first question, and most CEOs and business owners have a hard time answering this. When this is all over, your business career is over. What's the picture look like? What does it look like? How big is the company? When do you want to retire? Do you want to sell? Do you want to acquire? Are you passing it off to your children? What's the end game? Ryan, they can't answer this question. And I said, well, I have a hard time helping you because now I don't know where this goes. I need to know where the end game is. So the first very difficult conversation is, and I'll give you one example. I had one company who said, they're doing 5 million. He said, we'd love to get to like 15 million. I said, okay, you have 40 employees. You want at 5 million, you want to get to, so that's about 120 employees. And he looked at me and goes, I don't want that. I said, okay, well, you just told me this. So what are we going to change? What are we going to do? And so the first conversation is really with the CEO and the business owner before I bring everybody else in is, what do you want? Mm-hmm. Where do you want to take this company? After that, we get into a lot of the nit grit. For example, what is the pain point? And I spoke about this earlier. What is the pain point your company solves? Because even an accountant, who says, I do financial statements, that's not the pain point. You're solving a pain point for a company. What is it first? Then we talk about your solution. Then we talk about who we do this with. That could take a half a day because I spend 2 days with them before we even start this project, so I can learn their business as if I've worked for them for 20, 25 years. And so a lot of difficult questions. We'll do some of the traditional frameworks. We'll do a strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threat analysis, the SWOT analysis. We'll look at the competition from their perspective. We'll look at the different markets from their perspective. I will do especially manufacturers and distributors, I do a full tour of their facility. I want to learn their entire manufacturing process. And they're like, but you're a sales guy. Yeah, I know, but I need to understand how this business runs because I can't be of help. Remember, I'm not the sales guy. I'm a strategy guy who's going to drive the bus from the sales side. So first 2 days, we have that real intense get to know each other. I get to know their business. After that, my team and I, we go and we'll do all this research. What does the market look like? What's the current situation? Who's the dominant player? Why are they the dominant player? How are they positioned in this market? What are the rest of the competition up to? What's their pricing like? How do we get in? How's everybody marketing themselves? Okay, we need to know as much as if we've been in that market for so many years. We do an analysis of you talked about external, threats and opportunities. I need to understand the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal. If I don't have all that information, it's hard for us to react. And from then I prepare the go-to-market strategy. And often it really brings in the vision that the business owner has, but now he has the detail of she has the detail of how we're going to go and get it done with a budget, with an idea, with a concept for marketing and whatever. Once that's approved, my team and I roll it out. The business owner stays on the business side, works on that side, while we go and develop this side of the business. And all in all, we're checking in all the time with the CEO, head of finance, head of HR, everybody, marketing and so on, to make sure that we're all in line, we're all doing well. And often we're using the head of the sales leader. I'm also involving that person to make sure that eventually when I transitioned it to them, they could take over seamlessly. So it's a real nice transition from nothing to something substantial.
Now, David, you said something there that I want to clarify. So you engage with a company, you take a 40,000 foot view of the situation, you understand what's going on, and you start to drill down into the details. But it sounds like at some point your plan is to hand things off to somebody else in the company, and then I would assume you disengage at that point. What does a client life cycle look like with you? How long do you like to spend with clients, and what is the transition process at the end when you transition out?
The majority of the clients, we tell them it could take between 6 months and a year to get this thing off the ground, depending on what they want to achieve in year 1, 2, and 3, because we do plan that out. And often by the end of the first year, we're now talking about the next market, the next opportunity, because they tasted the growth. They've seen how smooth it's been. All right, we'll take over what you're currently doing. Where are we going to next? And so it depends on what they want to do and how they want to achieve it. Now, the US is a lot more complex, and it could take a little bit longer. A smaller market might take a little bit less time. But all in all, I tell everybody, if we talk about the research to the delivery, the finish of delivery, you're looking at somewhere between 12 and 15 months to get something substantial. Is it the complete project? Maybe not, but we will know about that before we launch into phase 2. But that's about it. It takes 12 to 15 months to really get what they want in that first year.
In my experience with my business, my team and I have long-term, multi-year relationships with clients, because the fact is, until they're really large, they can get out of a fractional professional sometimes more than they can out of a full-time hire for less than the cost of a full-time hire, because you're talking about executive level experience that you're bringing to the table. And even if you're working with a sales manager or a director of sales in a given organization, to be part consultant and part coach, but also someone who executes on some of the key components of the business, that can be fundamental for a business that's relatively large, that won't necessarily be able to find somebody to replace the value that you're bringing to the table.
When you do well, Ryan, and I think that's with anybody, they
Mm-hmm.
want you to be on board because you made them profitable.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in with clear ideas. You're coming in with a different vision. You and I are coming into businesses, bringing the experiences from other industries and other like-minded companies, and all of a sudden you're of great value. We're not tainted by that company, and so we're a valuable asset at the table. But you're right, we come at the investment of a percentage of what a real full-time individual would be. So it's a win-win across the board, without a doubt.
Yeah, and you've got perspective because you've got experience with a variety of different companies doing maybe somewhat different things, but there's best practices, and you're consistently bringing them to the table. Uh, when I was in the corporate world, we would occasionally hire or promote from within, but we would also hire from external companies because of the outside knowledge that we'd bring into the organization. But after a year or two, you've exhausted that. With a
Absolutely.
fractional professional, it's constant, right? There's
Constant,
always
constant, constant.
new.
And I experienced that when I was at the newspaper. I hired someone who had never ever sold advertising. They said, "Well, why would you do that?" I said, "Well, this person has a different perspective, different way of connecting with people." But after 2, 3 years, we saw that person picked up all the bad habits and all the other things and suddenly, like you said, their value diminished. And so, that's the hard part, is how do you keep full-time people fresh? And so guys like you and me, we can keep them fresh because now we get them to think of differently. Oh, did you think of? Did you consider? And all of a sudden they're like, no, I did not. And I had that with one client where he had an idea for a business model, and they had been sitting for a year to try to figure it out. Not that I'm some genius, but I asked 3 questions and they went, we never even thought about it like that. We didn't look at it from that angle. And then we built the skeleton of a business model over the next 3-4 hours. And now we're going to research it to see if it makes any sense to bring it to the United States. That's the beauty of bringing in someone like us who have that, like I said, white hair, seasoned experience, but also can bring in that cross industry, untainted, unbiased approach. And
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun that way.
for sure. And a lot of what you're talking about is strategy, and it sounds like you've got a really good approach with respect to the strategy on the revenue development side. But let's talk for a minute about execution. Strategy is one side of the coin. Execution is the other side of the coin. Without execution, the strategy is pretty meaningless.
Correct.
Tell our viewers about how you help a company execute. And just to give you kind of a sense of exactly what I mean, if somebody says to me, Ryan, I want to get in good shape, I'm going to say, exercise and eat right. But that's the easy part.
Correct.
Okay. there's more to it than just giving that advice. So tell me about your approach with respect to that.
And it's funny because I'll take exactly your example and saying, I'm not only going to give them the diet, I'm going to eat with them. And that's the big difference, is that a lot of consultants will come in and saying, here's a piece of paper, wish you the best of luck, have a great day.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't help. A lot of the times the business owner, I'll start with the business owner, doesn't know how to handle this new market. A lot of changes, a lot of questions. There's growth. So I'm actually with the CEO often as the ear, as I'm executing. I'm showing the CEO stuff that maybe they have never seen before, or experiences, or client interactions, or whatever. At the other end, when I'm working with the sales team or my team is developing it, we're actually writing out the playbook. Because in this new market, we don't know what I want to mean by a playbook. And forgive me if I use this sales cliche, but it's essentially the playbook of, not a script, but the script.
Mhm.
It's also all the stories, all the objections, everything that a salesperson can take. And it's not a real manual, but it's like a manual that they have as a reference of saying, okay, when you go visit client A, this is what it could happen, should happen, this, that.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have that necessarily written for that new market. So we got to write it out. We got to come up with it. We got to understand it. So while I don't go cold calling, and I'm not going to go knock on doors and whatever, I am very involved in all the presentations, especially at the beginning, especially with the bigger clients. We're strategizing it. We're going through it, and then we're going to see what happens. And then we take all that information and we really provide it to the company, saying, here's how we did it, and here's how it's different from what you're currently doing. So we take it from the high strategy conversations all the way down to like really getting into the grind. We've tested out scripts, we've tested out cold calling and methods, we've tested out emails. We're just trying to get a little bit of a shape and getting that starting point. And eventually, as time progresses, that will change and the company will take that on. But at the beginning, they don't really have it. So we build that and we make it happen. I also help in finding the salespeople. I might help in finding a sales director. I might help in finding distributors, partners. The business doesn't have the time for it. That's what we do.
Are you able to give advice and help a company put together an outline of their pipeline, what the different stages are, what the conversion rates are? Do you actually look at data and that kind of thing, or is that a little bit out of scope for you?
No, actually, I do look at it to understand their sales cycle, because if I'm talking about, and I've got a client in road construction, all right,
Mhm.
so they sell these large road construction equipments. They're between 50,000 and $500,000. And my conversation is, okay, walk me through a sales presentation that you do in Mexico. Now, it will be different, obviously, than the United States and Canada, but I want to know what they do. And I walk them through every stage. Now, often, Ryan, I ask the questions. They're like, oh, we didn't know. We didn't really reflect on that. We're not really sure. And now I'm forcing them to go back to their sales team and go, oh, wow, how have we done here? I'm not a coach to the point where I officially tell them, do ABC. But I have worked with sales teams and refined their messaging and refined the sales cycle. But yeah, we do want to know, how long does it take from first contact to contract, and then after delivery, because that after delivery is just as important as everything else. So we write it all out, we challenge it, and then we want to make sure that when we go to that new market, it doesn't stray too far off of what we're currently doing, because that becomes very harsh on the company. But yeah, we that data, that information, that's gold.
I imagine most businesses that need your help or that get your help didn't really know that they needed it, or that, like, if somebody's out there right now that needs your help, they don't really know that they need your help. What would you tell them? What would you put out there to say, hey, listen, if you're in this situation, we should probably at least chat?
What I tell everybody is a conversation with me is free. So like chatting or whatever. But really it's a question of, and Ryan, I think I'll bring a little bit of finance into this.
Yeah.
If someone tells you, year over year we're stable, that's not fact. There's no such a thing as even from last year. You're either down or up, because last year's dollar is not this year's dollar. And so I tell them, if you're stable, quote unquote, if you're dropping in sales, or you feel that you've maxed out that current market and you don't know what's the next step for growth, let's have a conversation, because we could stem the tide. If there's a decline, we can stem the tide by looking at, maybe you need to diversify into another market because this market isn't enough for you. Okay, and I've have a client like that where we literally have to expand to keep the business afloat because that current market is not going to sustain it. So sometimes thinking from diversification is a way to not only to save the company but to grow it. But if you're stuck, you just don't know where to go, how to go, even why you should grow, let's have a conversation.
Okay. David, what challenges do you see companies that you engage with have with respect to the finance side of the business? And just to help to frame it up a little bit, I've recognized with a lot of our clients that on the sales and marketing side of the business, there are some weaknesses. They've been successful to a point, but there are opportunities to optimize that success. And I'll often be asked questions about, well, how should I compensate my salespeople? And, how much of it should be base salary? How much of it should be performance based salary? And what should the commission timelines be? Should it be annual or quarterly or monthly and things like that? And so I get that all the time, and I'm often trying to help a company on the revenue side, even though that's not my main lane. You must come across that a little bit. Maybe tell me a little bit about that. I'd love to hear what you find.
Let me tell you, that financial conversation is very painful, because now I have to tell, especially companies, that, oh, by the way, now that we go into a new market, there are a few things you need to consider. Number one is, what does a salesperson really make in your industry in that new market? And so some cases, especially when they come into the United States, all of a sudden, or in Canada, salaries are suddenly are ridiculously higher than what they're used to paying.
Mm.
Then there's all the benefits. Then there's the taxation. So a lot of times I tell them, we need to sit down with a financial individual to understand, what do we really need to pay? How much is that going to go to the cost of goods, all the cost of sale, not the cost of goods sold, probably, but the cost of sale. So I have that conversation with them, and see what can we afford, and therefore how much sales do we have to generate to cover that? Well, that's part one. Then there's the cost of goods sold conversation that I have to have for a manufacturing distributor, because they'll tell me, well, my cost of goods or my cost of service is X in my market. Amazing. But what's it going to be if we have to ship it or actually do it in the new market? And that's where I bring in the CFO or the fractional CFOs. I do appreciate accountants, but they're wonderful at looking at the rearview mirror and saying, oh, this is what was. Okay, but I need you to help me what is. What can I look at it for the next year, 2, 3? What do I need financially? And I need to have that conversation with the head of finance, like yourself, or CFO, because the business owner, unfortunately, often the business owners, if they understand finance, it's awesome. Many of mine that I met do not. And I don't want to offend anybody, but my favorite story is, I had to teach a CEO that his cash flow statement and his income statement aren't the same.
Yeah, it's common.
And I know it's common, and every CFO tells me the same thing, but they're amazed that I can actually teach them and tell them why it's not. And when I have that conversation, I say, listen, please understand that in the United States, if you deal with Walmart, for example, you might end up being with a net 90, net 120 day payment on your receivables. That can have a massive impact on your cash flow. Do you really want to go to a Walmart then? And I use Walmart as an example because it's familiar. But there are a lot of large players that want to abuse small players or new players in the market. And I have to bring finance in to say, can the company afford 90 days of no cash for this sale? And those are very tough conversations, and they're not expecting it from sales.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very sticky situation. And I've lost a few clients because I've had to tell them that they weren't financially ready for what they wanted to do. I would rather set a fractional CFO and help them before they talk to me.
Well, and it's good to understand where you can and where you cannot help as much. And it's good to be able to turn away somebody who may be interested in your services if they're not a good fit for you. But that's what makes the difference between a good salesperson and most other salespeople, is that a good salesperson is going to be selling the person or the business or the organization what it needs to be better. So there's a win-win there. A poor salesperson is forcing stuff on you that you don't need, right? And that's, to me, that's been, in my experience, that's been the greatest difference between excellent salespeople and people who are in sales, but they're not excellent salespeople.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've had to find too many of those. And you asked me before what I would do, and I've actually had to whisper to a few business owners, this is not the right person. This person's hurting your business. And it's a hard call, because I don't want to get into the HR side of it. But, the business owner wants that kind of help. And that's, again, I go back to sitting down with finance and saying, before I go make a qualitative call, and I teach this to my students, is like, when you're looking at your salespeople, there's the qualitative and the quantitative side. And the quantitative side could tell you, this guy is maybe the second worst salesperson. Okay, but qualitative wise, they could do this, 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 and this. And if we invest in training and this and that, that person can get better, or vice versa. So I've gone through these conversations, but that's why it's so important to have that interdepartmental cooperation, so that we can, because we're all trying to achieve the same goal of growth.
Yeah, it's critical having that perspective. David, you're the CEO of your own company as well as a CRO for other companies, and being able to have a CEO to CEO kind of a conversation, being able to do that from the point of view of understanding the different functions of business and how they all work together, that's very important. And I'm sure that's appreciated by your clients.
Indeed.
David, we've reached the point in the show where I give you the opportunity to ask me, a fractional CFO, any question you might have pertaining to business or your experience regarding business or anything that you're interested in talking about. Now's the time. Let me know what a question is that you have for me.
So here's a question that I'm going to ask you, and I know what we discussed about before, but I might get to twist it a little bit differently. And that is, you know, from your perspective right now, okay, where prediction is very, very difficult right now. People are like, I heard an economist today said, can't predict. How do you help companies? If sales shows up and says, yeah, I can get you $1 million, I could do the. What are you doing right now today, Ryan? How are you helping the company to understand how to predict in these very interesting times?
Some companies, it's more easy than others, right? There are some companies whose situation isn't impacted as heavily by tariffs and so on. What I try to do is to map out for my client what the future might look like. So similar to what you try to do, I want to understand what their goals are for the long term, but also the mid and short term. So if we're talking about a 1 year kind of a forecast or budget for sales and for cost of goods sold and for expenses, the whole financial P&L budget, I want to map out with them a couple of scenarios. When there's a lot of uncertainty, I like to have a few scenarios. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, most likely scenario. And to give you a flavor why that works so well is when you think of worst case scenario, sometimes our imaginations can go kind of crazy. But when you put it on a spreadsheet, worst case scenario isn't zeros across the board, right? So you can begin to plug in some reasonable numbers, and that'll provide a minimum that you can work with in. Then you can put together a best case scenario, assuming that things work out well. If we're in a situation where the future is looking dire, if we're looking backwards, we know what our conversion rates are from a sales point of view. We can put together a sales forecast that has a bottom-up component to it, where we talk to the individual salespeople and we understand what they've got in their pipeline. We understand what they're expecting their current clients to be doing in the next period, whether that be growing organically or shrinking a little bit. We want to understand when rate increases might kick in. We want to understand if there are cross-selling opportunities or upselling opportunities. We want to plug those in so we can get an idea from our current client base on a per salesperson basis, what might our revenue look like. Then we can look at the lead pool. We can look at the new prospects, what our salespeople are willing to commit to in terms of sales to new business development, sales to new clients, and we can put those down on a month-by-month basis. When might that happen? We know what our lead times are. We know what our conversion rates are. We're not going to get crazy, but let's assume that we're going to do reasonably well. That's your best case scenario, okay? And that's going to look a lot better than your worst case scenario. Your most likely scenario is the one that's going to be closer to accurate, 9 times out of 10. So you fill that in, but if we're a little bit more conservative on some of these estimates, where does that put us? That gives you 3 scenarios. That's not too much. That's not something that a company can't digest and understand. Within those scenarios, we can put together what we think our cost of goods sold are going to be, what our gross profit margins are going to be, what our overhead expenses are going to be. We might decide that to be profitable or to manage our cash flow, we need to cut some expenses. And we'll try to figure out what those might be. But we may even decide that investing maybe in advertising or in something like that, that might be a good move where we'll get a return on investment in the period of time in which we need it. It can get complicated to talk about without a spreadsheet, but the beauty of what I do is I can put it down. I can take the strategy and translate it into numbers on a spreadsheet, and I can spend time working with the business owner or the other stakeholders in the business, explaining the details. Even if you don't understand Microsoft Excel very well, I can show you, I can put it in your language. This is what this means. Here are the parameters. So here are the guardrails with respect to risk. We can't go over here and we can't go over here. So no, maybe you have to cancel the order on the new pool this year, but we can still make some good business decisions, and we can still potentially increase our wages to employees on a cost of living basis, whatever the case might be. We can map that out. And then what we do is we manage it month by month. What's the plan? What were we planning on doing? What results did we actually get? Do we need to make course corrections? Do we need to speak with our HR person, fractional or not? Do we need to speak with our revenue person, fractional or not? What needs to be done? We can address that month by month. And so you have your finger on the pulse of the patient, so to speak. In a situation where you're expecting it's going to be tough times, you want to keep a close eye on the vitals. And at the same time, you want to recognize opportunities. If we see an opportunity and we've got our eyes on the numbers. If the key stakeholders in the business know what their key financial indicators are and what the trend is looking like, we can identify opportunities and we can move on those in a proactive way. If you think about what's happening right now, a lot of this was predictable, and a lot of people did make predictions based on it, and they made some moves. There's other companies who weren't very proactive about things and they were reactive. I love being proactive. Even when you're wrong, it's better than just kind of going, what happened? Along the way, you can identify. It's like having your headlights on when you're driving down the highway. You want to see the turns before you get there. To me, that's what a financial budget is. And being able to be the person who's working with the clients, they don't have to crunch the numbers. They don't have to be thinking about this every day. But on a fairly regular basis, I'm going to be bringing to their attention things they need to know regarding their numbers. And when they have questions regarding their numbers, it's at their fingertips. That way, the uncertainty becomes less of an issue. It may still be an issue. Let's face it. There are sometimes things that happen that are not good, and there'll be a negative impact. But when you are preparing for them in advance and you're being strategic about it, that almost never hurts, and it almost always helps. And I've had very good experience with that.
It's actually interesting because what you said about those different scenarios is in line with what I would do with my clients. And I said to them, look, perfect world, here's what we're going to do. Not so perfect world, here's what we're going to do, which like you would call real.
Yeah.
And then there's the uh-oh. And I tell them, listen, right now, and they didn't want those scenarios. They said, just give me one. And I used, and I know I keep repeating this, but I used the current situation. I kept saying, look, guys, we need to pivot just in case. And it happened to be that one of my clients called me up and said, you're right. I don't think we could do this. Let's pivot. And I said, okay, hold on. Now let's have a conversation about plan A and plan B. What do you want to do? And that was a very interesting conversation. We're sticking to plan A, but we're now planning plan B, or putting in place plan B a little sooner than we originally wanted to, just in case plan A really craps out. And that's part of what you and I could do, is to help them to see those additional scenarios and additional opportunities without too much damage, too much risk. And I think that a lot of companies will say, I'll try Europe. Oh, Europe didn't work. Okay, I'll go to the United States. Oh, okay, I'll go to Africa. Oh, okay. No, you can't do that. But if you have that information, like you said, you got the financial statements, you got the budgets, you got the qualitative research, you got the plans, this and that. Now you can make smarter decisions. And if you need to pivot, you're much more prepared than your competitor.
That's right. And you've got the process in place so that when you make the pivot, you've got a good idea what that might look like.
Got a good idea. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, this is really enjoyable talking shop with you, David. We've got some similar experiences with respect to dealing with our clients, and the strategy part is great. The execution part's the fun part, eh? Like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I think the fun part is when you make that first, and again, a salesman, make that first sale in the new market for a business, the eyes just light up.
Yeah.
The opportunities that they thought were like, oh my God, I didn't think it was possible. Oh my God, it works. And there's an excitement. They can't wait for more. And just that emotion, I mean, that's enough to keep me going.
Yeah, I relate to that 100%. It's like playing sports when you were a little kid, eh? Like being on a team and getting results. And the advantage we have as fractional professionals is we can be on a few different teams, but at the same time, we can make that positive difference, and that feels great.
And it's actually funny because I'm on different teams, I actually connected two of them and said, oh, by the way, you guys can actually collaborate. And they're like, you do that?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of that myself. It's interesting. Hey, you start to be able to connect people.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so David, let's see here. If somebody wanted to reach out to you and find you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to approach you or to find you?
Yeah. No, well, look, I'm all over LinkedIn. You can find me there. But really, the best way is info@serogrowth.com. You can email me. Come to my website at www.serogrowth.com. You can reach me through there. I'm easily accessible. My contact information, like I said, is on LinkedIn at the website. Feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, say hi. Love to hear about your stories. Love to hear your journeys. Really, I that's what I enjoy the most, is hearing business owners' journeys, how they got there. So please reach out and tell me.
Okay. And David, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. And to our viewers out there, if you enjoyed this podcast, if there's anything that you found interesting, please share it with others. And you can visit us on our YouTube page for other information, educational information regarding Fractional CFO Services. In some cases, they get into the sales side of things. In some cases, they get into the operations side of things, HR, you name it. But we'd welcome you. We'd love to have you visit our page and subscribe. David, thanks again. We're pretty much done, but I'll give the last word to you. Anything else that you'd like to say or comment about?
Ryan, first of all, I want to thank you and your producer, Logan, for this. This was awesome. But the one thing I want to tell everybody is really simple. The sky is still the limit. Don't hesitate. Reach out beyond your borders. It is attainable.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.